YouTube. My name is Jack, and I cannot believe that I have never made this video before. Today we're going to talk about a subject that is near and dear to my heart, which is gender roles in Wicca. This is something I talk about constantly. If you follow me on Twitter, you've probably seen at least one thread where I've talked about it. If you're in any of the initiate spaces I'm in, I talk about this frequently. So this is a soapbox of mine. And yesterday I was having lunch with a friend and the subject came up, and it occurred to me that I don't actually have a video about this. I don't have a video that I can just sort of casually refer people to for all of my thoughts about gender roles in Wicca. So, here we go. Gardnerian Wicca in particular has a reputation for very strict gender roles. Girls do this, boys do this. And this, in turn, comes out of a fairly sort of cisheteronormative structure in the origins of Gardnerian Wicca, right? Like, Wicca is built around the relationship between a goddess and a god, and then covens are run by the partnership of a high priestess and a high priest in a way that is meant to somehow mirror or reflect that divine partnership. And so Wicca has a gender role thing going on. And there are lots of opinions floating around about whether that's a good thing, whether that's essential to Wicca, or whether it can be done without. There are opinions about what those gender roles mean, what they're for, where they come from, why, sort of theologically, we might have them. And because it's Wicca, and Wicca is so decentralized and has no unified theology, there is no one answer to any of those questions. Every coven practices differently. Every coven has different perspectives on these things. Individual practitioners within the same coven have different perspectives on these things. So I know of covens that have extremely strict gender roles. I know of covens that do away with gendered roles in the craft altogether and have everyone doing all of the things. What I want to talk about today is my personal perspective on gender roles in the craft, how I think about them, what they mean to me, what their utility is in ritual, and sort of how that influences the way that I approach my practice of Wicca. This is just one practitioner's perspective. I do not speak for all of Wicca, etc., 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 but at the same time, I think I'm right. So, do with that what you will. Wicca, as I practice it, as I understand it, as I approach it, is organized around two ritual roles, the roles of the priestess and the priest. And each of those roles has particular responsibilities in ritual. There are certain things that the priestess does that the priest does not do, and vice versa. And they're also trained a little bit differently. So the priestess, again, in the way that I practice Wicca, which is not representative of every coven, but the priestess is trained to move energy in a particular way, is trained to sort of approach the sort of connection that she has to other members of the coven in a particular way, and the priest is trained to move energy and connect to the magical body of the coven in a different and complementary way, so that when the two of them work magic together, their partnership can be fruitful and productive in a very particular way that comes out of the priestess and the priest each doing different and complementary things. But I don't actually think that these roles are inherently gendered, right? I think the terms priestess and priest are gendered terms which prime us to think about these roles as being essentially connected to gender. But we could just as easily talk about them as clergy A and clergy B, right? Clergy A has particular ritual responsibilities. There are things that clergy A does in ritual. There are things that clergy A does not do in ritual. There are ways that clergy A is taught to move energy. Clergy B has a different and complementary set of ritual responsibilities. And again, there are things that are done and not done and taught to clergy B that are unique to clergy B. And I think those things don't have to be inherently gendered. At the same time, to my personal understanding of Wicca, it's really important that we have these two roles. I think one of the deepest and most important things about Wicca is this notion of relationality that's built into coven practice and to a partnership-based Wiccan practice in particular. There's an idea that in Wicca, in traditional Wicca, you know, obviously I'm not talking about solitary Wicca here, which has a very different kind of ritual structure, but in traditional Wicca, Gardnerian Wicca, like the sort that I'm talking about, as well as Alexandrian Wicca and so on, you can't do it all alone. It's not all about you, and you are relying on another person as a partner to help you make magic happen. And then sort of popping out one more level from that, you're not just relying on a one-on-one relationship with a partner, but you're relying on your entire coven. And the idea that, like, you are not the center of the universe and that you rely on other people, that other people bring something to the table that you don't have, is really critical to my understanding of Wicca. And so for me, it's really, really important that we have priestess and priest, or clergy A and clergy B, because these are two ritual roles that break up the ritual and say, this is a thing that cannot be done alone. This is a thing that requires the partnership, the give and take between two people who have been trained in two different ways. Additionally, as you are initiated into Wicca and move up through the degrees, clergy A and clergy B each experience a different set of mysteries. The mysteries that they experience are parallel to each other, they're related to each other, but the mysteries that you're going to experience, the way that you're going to experience the mysteries of Wiccan ritual without going into any specifics there, are, at least in my experience and my perspective, going to be different for a priest than for a priestess. They're going to be different for clergy B than for clergy A. And again, coming back to the idea of magical partnership, I think it's really significant that we have someone who has experienced this set of mysteries working alongside someone who's experienced that set of mysteries. The idea, again, that, like, my experience brings something to the table that you don't have. Your experience brings something to the table that I don't have. And we complement and complete each other to allow our magic to happen. Do I want to... I think, sort of related to this, there's something really beautiful and powerful about the idea that even in a mystery cult, there are some mysteries that are still inaccessible to you. I frequently say that any magical system worth its salt will always tell you that there is something that you don't know. There's something that you can't know. Not because it's like a big spooky, oh, you have to make it to the 11th degree before we can reveal this to you. But just that, like, we are finite beings and we have finite knowledge. And of course there are things that we will never know. And any magical system that doesn't say that, any magical system that doesn't remind you that your knowledge and experience are essentially limited, is selling something. So again, I think it's really important and significant for me that in Wicca, there are mysteries that I, as a priest, have experienced that priestesses never have. And conversely, there are mysteries, sorry, there are sirens going on outside. I hope that's not too loud. We'll find out together. Conversely, there are mysteries that priestesses have experienced that I never will. And, I have been exposed to this beautiful set of mysteries in the tradition that has been deeply meaningful to me, and that has fundamentally altered the course of my life. But also, there are still some doors that are shut to me and will always be shut to me. And that, I think, is a good thing. There are other people who might disagree, but to me, it's sort of a reminder of humility, and a reminder that, like, any one person can never know it all. So, to me, gender roles in Wicca are gendered because we're in the habit of assigning these two roles, clergy A and clergy B, along gendered lines. And for the cis folks and the binary trans folks among us, that works perfectly well. If you're a woman, you take the role of clergy A. If you're a man, you take the role of clergy B. Problem solved. For non-binary folks in the craft, God, the sirens are so loud. I am so sorry. For non-binary folks in the craft, it really depends, right? It depends on who the person involved is, what their gender identity and expression are, and how they feel most comfortable in ritual. Who they are in ritual is going to depend on who they are in life. So I know some non-binary people who will always take the same ritual role. So they are non-binary, their gender is not, man or woman, but they may always be clergy A. They may always be a priestess in ritual. Conversely, I know some non-binary practitioners who will pick one role or the other on a case-by-case basis. So for one ritual, they will act as a priestess. For another ritual, they will act as a priest. And it just depends on what feels right to them in the moment. And sort of as yet a third option, I know of some non-binary practitioners who kind of want to do a gender fuck and mix it all up and be breaking down those sort of binary roles of clergy A and clergy B, and instead moving energy in a totally different way, or doing some of the things that clergy A would do and some of the things that clergy B would do. And again, that just depends on the practitioner and the coven and what's right for them, what the right way is to make them feel like they belong in the circle. So, people make a really big deal out of gender roles in the craft, and certainly the, hardcore transphobe Gardnerians fall back on the importance of gender roles in the craft as, proof that it's all about, biological fertility, and sperm plus egg makes baby, and that's what the craft is all about. And speaking for myself, that's really not what it's about. I think these roles are important because I think they speak to deeper mysteries about relationality, partnership, the inaccessibility of certain kinds of wisdom. I think each of the roles puts you in a particular kind of relationship to the gods, and that those are two different kinds of relationships, and that that's a valuable thing to have. But to me, the fact that these roles are gendered is not a deep theological thing. I am so sorry about the sirens. Clearly, something is on fire, or an old lady is stuck in a tree, or a cat has fallen and can't get up. Anyway, where was I? For me, the gendered roles in the craft are not essentially gendered. The fact that they are gendered is kind of incidental to the deep mysteries that they express. Now, at the same time, there are potentially other reasons for these roles being gendered, and those are largely sort of politico-theological reasons. So Wicca in particular is a feminist religion. There are probably people who would quibble with me on that, but at least my understanding of Wicca, the Wicca that I practice, is feminist, and one of the ways in which it is feminist is that it is unabashedly modeled on sort of a matriarchal-ish image of society, wherein a high priestess is the leader of her coven. Now, a high priestess is not ideally a tyrant, right? A high priestess is working with a partner, and is not going to be bullying everyone around her into submission, but at least in the version of Wicca that I understand and practice, when someone has to have the final say, it's going to be the high priestess. And as a political statement, that's really significant. That's really important that the high priestess, the woman, has this role of primacy in the coven. And that's a thing that you want to hold on to, or at least I want to hold on to, because it has a really deep significance that is maybe divorced from some of the other significance about partnership or particular kinds of mysteries that I talked about before. So there are still good reasons for these maybe to be gendered roles, and to say that we want clergy A to be a priestess because there's a kind of political statement of feminism that comes along with that. there are and have been covens either consisting entirely of men or run by, partnered men. There have been same-sex couples running covens before. These things happen and have happened. And they're exploring maybe a different set of mysteries or a different way of relating to mysteries than the thing that I'm presenting here. So, for example, a lot of the time, couples, like same-sex couples that end up running a coven together, will be in a position where, like, they're both initiates and they may be romantically or sexually partnered, and they want to bring that partnership into their coven work because there's a really deep mystery of love and romantic connection that they want to bring expression to in their craft practice. A lot of the time, at least in the US, covens that are run like that will bring in someone of another gender to assist with certain rites where politically it's very important that everything sort of be done by the book. But when it's a coven just sort of operating on its own terms, they can do what they like, and they can toy with these roles and find different expression for these roles that maybe other covens aren't doing. Every coven has its own way of relating to the mysteries, and the version that I've presented here, with clergy A and clergy B, and those being fundamentally not gendered roles, but roles on which we might still want to institute an understanding of gender for other political reasons. That's my individual perspective, but that's not the final word on the Gardnerian tradition, and there are lots of covens that do things differently. I know of covens that are very hardcore about gender roles, even to the point of, excluding trans people. I think that's shitty, but it's a thing that there are Gardnerian covens that do. Unfortunately, they are no less Gardnerian than I am, and they get to run their coven the way that they see fit. Conversely, there are also covens that do away with gendered roles or ritual roles entirely, and don't teach different ways of moving energy for different people, don't teach different ritual actions for different people, and instead are teaching everyone the same thing and the same set of mysteries and so on. And again, that's a perspective that is entirely legitimate. Those covens run the way they want to run. It's a way of interacting with Wicca that does not appeal as much to me personally, but it's still a very legitimate approach to the craft. So there are lots of different ways to approach, to engage with, to critically think about what gender and gender roles are doing for Gardnerian Wicca. But my own perspective on it really comes back to this idea that there are two roles that exist in partnership with each other, that complement each other in terms of ritual action and sort of energetic flow. And that there are good reasons, other than, essentialist gender theology, that there are good political reasons for these roles to be assigned along gendered lines when possible. And then when we have people who don't fit neatly into a gender binary, we talk to them and figure out what the best way is for them to be present in circle in a way that feels authentic to them. So that's my soapbox. That's my perspective on gender roles in Gardnerian Wicca. Can't believe I never made this video. Anyways, I hope you all have a good day. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you sometime soon.